we might practice you sharing your screen at the start before I introduce you, because we're on a couple of minutes early.
Okay.
So in a minute.
You let me know when.
Okay, so we are online now. So if you just want to practice sharing your screen, and then we'll go ahead and do your intro after you've done that. Want to have a go?
You can see that?
Nope, I can see you. There is a delay though, so have you got a slide or something up?
Yeah, it's up. Let me try this. Does this work?
Okay, yeah. Yep, whatever you just did then, that works beautifully.
So you can see, okay.
I can see you now beautifully. So if you want to go back to the start while I
Yeah,
introduce you, and then we can jump into it.
sure.
So a massive welcome to everyone that is jumping in and has come online to hear Constantine's talk this afternoon. I think, Constantine, I was mentioning to you just when we got on a few minutes ago, when we were just having the preliminary discussions. I'm so much looking forward to your conversation with us today about from lockdown to liberation. And I think there's so much that, if we choose to be open as humans, that we can learn from the year 2020. And so I'm very much interested in your take on things. I understand you're also the co-founder of the Conscious Accelerator. So do you mind just by kicking off, just by sharing what the Conscious Accelerator actually is, and then you can jump
Yeah,
into the talk? Great.
yeah, sure. So, I mean, it'll become obvious to the people who are taking part. Firstly, I wanted to say thank you, everyone, for your time and attention and for listening to me. I don't want this topic to trigger anyone. I am sensitive to the fact that the pandemic is causing lots of suffering for many people directly, economically, financially, psychologically, and from a health perspective. However, even though that is the case, in the face of all that, we do have choice. And I wanted to share my journey this year that was triggered by lockdown, and I luckily had the chance to do something different, and I'll explain it in a second. So the Conscious Accelerator is a youth leadership, individual, and entrepreneurial program to quantifiably help people become enlightened.
Oh, wow. That's even
So,
better. Now you describe it that way.
yeah, yeah. So one of my teachers says the only way we're really going to make a serious change in the world is by quantifiably putting enlightened people in power.
Yeah.
So, so if there was a way to have a checklist to say that, okay, sorry, you're still a little bit immature, got some work to do, blah 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 blah, but you can't run for president, you can't run for leadership, you can't, unless you. And there are amazing breakthroughs in the last 5 years in both neuroscience and certain protocols and long-term 15-year studies that show that we can quantifiably, objectively, scientifically determine whether someone is enlightened or not. Now, that's a little bit of a loaded term, right? What does enlightenment mean? Well, from my perspective, it's seeing through the illusion of what is potentially our experience of reality, and actually understanding that we are at the ground of our being is compassion and love, and that in actual fact our experience of this duality or separateness is an illusion, and therefore if the reality of it is of this reality, if the direct experience of this reality is non-dual, then why would I actually want to be in a place where I put my fellow sentient beings down and don't support each other collectively? So, you know, what we're looking to do is to give people a direct experience, not a theoretical experience, of true nature.
And I think, Constantine, in that light, what you're talking about in regards to enlightened leaders, it just makes me think about the whole recruitment process for politicians and how much different that actually needs to be in order to capture people who are more awakened or more enlightened.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I'll have to keep my foot on the clutch because I can go down many rabbit holes.
No
And
problem.
obviously, this is a very passionate and exciting topic for me,
Did you
especially.
want to share your presentation?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
I
beautiful.
just put together a few slides just to keep me on the straight and narrow. Um, let me know when you can see that.
I can't as yet, but like I said, there is a delay, but I can't see it yet.
Okay.
Did you do the same thing as last time?
Yep.
Okay, it is coming on. Beautiful. We've got it. It's all
It's
good.
working. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Let me know if anything changes. So once again, thank you everyone for your time. It's been an interesting year for everyone, and I wanted to honor the continuous opportunities that are presented to us to see things differently. And the reason we have a logo that has a planet that looks a little bit like Earth but isn't, is that potentially we can look at Earth from a different lens, through different eyes, if we awaken. Um, so this topic is about from lockdown to liberation. I'm the Chief Enlightenment Officer at the Conscious Accelerator. But I have a team of amazingly gifted, accomplished, either neuroscientists or Indo-Tibetan teachers, kinesiologists, and New York Times best-selling authors of on the topic of leadership, coming together to make the Conscious Accelerator a reality. And it was born out of my own experience, but after really having spent a lot of time. What's wrong with my? Yeah, a lot of time in the venture world. I've been the head of venture capital for a few years. I've been an entrepreneur myself with successful exits and all that kind of stuff. But to be honest with you, the thing that really that was really driving me was the question down on the bottom of that page, if you can see it. How can we enable a global centric consciousness shift at scale? It's something that's plagued me for quite some time after having built.
That's the high value question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And like we experimented in 2008, 2012, between those years, and built a culture of a digital transformation business that had zero attrition, had consciousness and flow as being the key values in the organization. And to be honest with you, we had success. We had zero attrition. We were acquired because of the culture. And that got me thinking even deeper around things like uh, if we could use the economic engine as it is, and actually make conscious leadership a competitive advantage, what could happen then? So,
I think it's interesting question that you posit because there's pretty much no doubt that conscious leadership is a competitive advantage. It's just how many people choose to believe that.
yeah, so quantifying it and proving it, that's another presentation because
Yeah.
I've spent the last 10 years actually doing that, and having led more than 400 startups through my programs. I would measure for how conscious are the founding teams, and actually, in actual fact, what I discovered was there's about 10% of the 400 were quite adaptable, aware, resilient, had a flat kind of connect, collaborate, based level of leadership and sustainability as a key metric, and that was way ahead of the rest of the cohorts. And I've tracked them over the last 5 years, and they've all been very successful and tripled in size as a minimum. So there's definitely a correlation between conscious leadership teams and success, and then as a result, having a conscious culture, right? Because
Absolutely. There's a tool that we use that measures self-actualizing leadership, and that which I would equate to conscious leadership. And there is, direct correlation between how self-actualized the CEOs are and how overall successful the business is.
true, absolutely. Actually, that reminds me of this book, Transcend. which is the continuation of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs of, which was kind of a little bit plagiarized by management consultants and said the ultimate gold standard is self-actualization. In actual fact, before Maslow died, he said, no, it's beyond, it's self-transcendence. And this book from the amazing Scott Barry Kaufman covers that. It's really, really, really interesting.
Mm.
So let's talk about lockdown. I think it was April. I remember on a Sunday afternoon, my partner saying, "Oh my God, New York's been locked down," and I had this anxiety would be not doing it justice, just come over me to the point where my heart went into dysarrhythmia. So it was definitely this. It was a real concern. I ended up having to go to the doctor, who said, "Let's go to the hospital." And I said, "Like, can you give me like a couple of weeks? Let me see if I can just calm myself down. Right? I'll just get off the coffees and blah blah blah." And up until then, I did have a daily practice of meditation, more like mindfulness based, that would give me some relief and some calmness. But generally speaking, these 20 expressions of the ground of my being in lockdown, and probably on most days, fundamentally, I would sum it up by saying suffering for no reason most of the time. And heart palpitations is always concerning. And so, but what I did notice is, just like everyone else, I was trying to make sense of what was going on in the world. And it didn't help that a lot of people were calling me and calling each other and just trying to support each other. But what was happening is that there was just this continuation of these, stories of how bad this is going to be for the global economy. What kind of resilience do I need now? Because I'm known to kind of provide resilience coaching as well. And 5 days go by. I hadn't done a minute of meditation. I was just so triggered and so trying to make sense in all the feeds that I stopped and I went, "Whoa, what are you doing?" So it took me about 2 weeks to get back to where I was. My heart settled down. Didn't need to do anything.
I think you've got their poor communication, and I think the over communication doesn't help. When you basically streaming live on social media and then you're home and you're watching the news, if you're constantly putting all that information into your head, then you're going to be getting more than those symptoms you've got on the page.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and then you fall into the world is effed, and it's not safe and all sorts of other stuff, right? It's just too easy to do that. But I, at the time, I still do have a kinesiologist, and he was doing some muscle testing on me, and he said, "Oh, there's an opportunity for you. You're going to end up going deeper than you've ever been before." So I heard that and contemplated it, and I thought, you know what? Since my work is now down to 2 days a week, why don't I just set up a 10-week self-isolated retreat from home? I've got nowhere else to go, and it's going to be easier to go deeper because I'm not going to be so distracted and not going to have to travel so much and all that. Well, at all. And so that's what I did at the start of May. It was actually meant to be 4 weeks, but it was so good that I extended it by another 6 weeks.
I love
And I'm going to go through what I did. So
it.
this,
Okay.
I'm going to like brass nuts. So this is the experiment: 10-week self-isolated retreat. I already had a kinesiologist, Ian Haycroft, who I use to help me spot the blind spots in my subconscious, and I've been with him for 2.5 years. He's amazing. The universe manifested a teacher for me in Stephen Altair, who's a Tibetan Buddhist practitioner for 30 years plus, is pretty close with all the relevant lamas and the Dalai Lama and whatnot, and he's a biofeedback teacher as well, so he teaches you how to use the tech, which I'll go into in a sec. And even actually before the lockdown, I was starting to fall in love with Locke Kelly, who's one of the new teachers on the block, who's modernized the Mahamudra, which is again Indo-Tibetan practice of awareness kind of practices, which gave me immediate, direct visceral experience of being totally present, like nothing I've ever experienced before.
Mm.
So that really helped me a lot because there was a palpable awakening, if you like. This is my 7-day retreat plan times 10. So it's pretty intense, but it would start with, and I'm happy to share this deck with anyone. Doing some.
Or if you're happy to share the deck with anyone, feel free to post it in the feed inside the Superhuman
Yeah,
Summit group afterwards. Yeah.
great, awesome. So this is just as guidance, right? So I'm a fan of the Muse headset, which is a
Our colleague who's running the Superhuman Summit with me has a Muse.
yeah, Muse. It's pretty cool. It's detachable, wearable, has an app, quantifies your EEG, it's an electroencephalograph, so it quantifies your brain waves. Has its own app, but there's also ways, and this is what Stephen, my teacher, taught me, ways to kind of download the data into another charting software so that you can actually just monitor yourself, because it's really easy to get lost in the subjective experience. But I'm going to go through some results after this as well. Mindful breakfast, emptiness practice, Mahamudra glimpses. I was doing the raising our vibration practices, which Stephen is part of. Mindful walking, light lunch and journaling. Do something creative and fun in the middle of the day. Some soma breath to get the parasympathetic nervous system going. Dzogchen study. I've got some pretty amazing books that have only recently been translated into the West over the last 3 years by Dan Brown. They come with warnings, actually. And I've really opened my mind. So not all practice is created equal. And these practices are like rapid transformation of your brain, which I'll show you in a moment. Because, I'm sure everyone on this call knows about neuroplasticity, so I'm not going to spend any time talking about that. But some practices get the brain to rapidly change, and adjust. Mindful dinner. Then I would do inquiry through Byron Katie's process called the work, and then journal before sleep.
So can I just ask, how many of those were your daily practices before you did the retreat plan, or did you introduce all of that for the retreat?
I would do about an hour or two of muse meditation, guided something, and breath work, and potentially do a glimpse practice in the day once. That was it.
Okay, so you cranked it up basically.
I cranked it up, but I also discovered Stephen for raising our vibration. Dzogchen. I got deeper into the Indo-Tibetan practices. So you've got to understand, there's 1,000 years of study into the nature of mind through the Indo-Tibetans versus 200 years in the West. And it's highly hijacked by people like Descartes, who said, I think, therefore I am. That's absolutely wrong.
That was the biggest furphy to change the rest of the medical direction of history, wasn't it?
Well, it's sidetracked everyone, right? And now we're catching up thanks to the internet and communities and the way we're collaborating, like this beautiful avenue that you've put together, and I am thankful forever to you both. The technology I used is, as I've already mentioned, the Muse headset for attention. Attention is very important. Concentration to have a good baseline. Sleep monitoring through the Oura ring, using PR6 or for resilience management. Brain entrainment through the neorhythm, which creates there's 7 different programs, and you can set it in different parts of the brain to either activate concentration or calm yourself down for sleep, or set yourself up for a good deep gamma sort of through electromagnetic frequencies to kind of stimulate the brain. And then using Mind Monitor together with the Muse to generate charts, which I'll show you in a sec. But for some of your audience, you may not understand the differences between all the brain waves. If you do a simple check, it's pretty simple. But for the longest of times, we thought that gamma in neuroscience circles was just noise. But in the last 2 years, research has come out of Brown University with Dr. Judd Brewer and Daniel Brown, who's Daniel P. Brown, who's
I have to laugh because every time you say Dan Brown, I think of the novelist Dan
no,
Brown.
it's not him.
And I know that that's not who you're talking about, but that's what my brain's doing.
Definitely not him. Daniel P. Brown. Yeah, yeah. And he's the gold standard. So what they've discovered is gamma helps you get insight. In other words, connecting two independently or three independently, seemingly independent things that are not related, and seeing the matrix between them, seeing the patterns.
It's more about perception.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But you'll see that alpha is a high level of alpha is what the Muse looks for when you use the Muse app to help with relaxation. Too much high beta is not really good. Too much alert can't turn off. Yeah. But then there's the theta and delta waves. So when you get really calm, obviously, you're having more of theta and more of delta as well. But the way they correlate to each other is what I want to learn. And so what I did was I would daily graph my brain using the mind monitor, and on average week 1 looked like this. So high alpha, which means I'm calm, a good narrow band between theta, delta, and beta, which is actually pretty healthy, and a little bit of an up and down, even though this is like 20 to 25, almost 20, 25 here, it's actually quite big. And the sensation of this experience is quite amazing. But so this is the objective experience in terms of what was going on. But the subjective experience was interesting as well. Calm, focused, and even some timelessness. So this didn't feel like a 40-minute or 30-minute meditation. It felt like a 5-minute or 10-minute meditation. To, wait for it, 8 weeks later, my brain basically, having adapted because of these practices, again, it's not just mindfulness. There's another 4 gates beyond mindfulness that I want people to understand. And this, what I'm sharing might be a little bit out there, but the data doesn't lie. So after about 8 weeks, I would, my brain got into synchronization. There was super high alpha that synchronized with a high gamma. And this experience apparently has been quantified through neuroscience labs and actually shown that there was an impact on other people around you. There's impact on a specific day. Actually, I remember having my family over, which, because it was just at a time when we could have, what was it, 20 people? I think they opened it. No, it was 10, I think. And they were starting to ask me without me soliciting anything about the Muse headset. They were seeking some calm. They were seeking some respite from all of the uncertainty. But my subjective experience was the thing that was the most impressive for me. Was the waves of bliss, joy, very embodied, very present, spacious, non-local, non-dual, no time, and very renewed. Especially at these points where there would be total absorption up here. There'd just literally be a falling away of this separate sense of self.
So in super flow, in essence.
Yeah. And there was an afterglow without practice for about 2 hours. So there was just this, wow, man, sometimes you finish a meditation and 10 minutes later you go to.
Because, you mentioned that your friends and family were interested in the Muse, and yet they would have been directly impacted by your different states of consciousness.
Yeah.
In a way that they may or may not have even realized.
Correct. That's what I think was happening. So I did a little bit of research to follow that up, because I've never been, that curious about these things. And sure enough, waves like that actually have an impact on others. Then 2 weeks later, and subsequently, the left frontal lobe of my brain has so much super high gamma that when I shared this on the online communities that I'm part of, people were like freaking out, right?
So Constantine, just a couple of people have just jumped on, so I just want to give them a brief update of where you're at. So Constantine, in did you say March or April you started this?
May.
In May. Okay, so in May of this year started like a self home retreat, and the self home retreat covered a range of different new activities and daily practices, including regularly wearing the Muse and other wearable tech in order to measure his states of consciousness. And so the graph that you're seeing is a measure of that at week 10.
Yeah. And the biggest difference between this slide and that slide is my subjective experience was I was just getting all this insight, all this. I was just, I mean, this is where the idea for the conscious accelerator was born, because I went, more people need to experience this. I'm no special, and everyone can get to this state. And then what, you know, the opportunity to provide respite in the midst of all this chaos, but also to develop yourself and discover who you truly are and have, dare I say it, mystical experiences. And then getting to a state of, all right, I already started at the beginning by talking about, you know, suffering for no reason all the time, you know, lack of contentment, to a small amount of joy, a small amount of bliss, and a lot of happiness all the time for no reason.
And in a short space of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the opportunity that was presented to me, and I thought, yeah, why don't I do that? I mean, you know, I'm only working 2 days a week, and that's light anyway. So yeah. Now I'm going to go into a couple of other slides. So that's the, you know, the results of the experiment. But these are the reasons why we struggle so much. The conditioned mind experiences life events and actually processes them through what's called, you know, the ordinary mind, or discerning mind, or the judging mind. And those are the reactive behaviors. So whatever happens externally gets reactive internally. And there's a mental health crisis going on. It was already an issue prior to Corona. Now, even the United Nations and the World Health Organization are, you know, doing research into how bad is the impact of the lockdowns and this isolation.
I think it's fair to say if anything good can come out of the lockdown process, a greater attention on mental health and
Yeah,
funding is a good thing to come of it.
yeah, agreed. And so the problem with the ordinary mind is pretty easy. From a mind perspective, mind wandering is a concern, because what ends up happening is that's where the separate sense of self is reaffirmed, self-referencing. When you mind wander, you think about your day and why that person didn't, you know, come back to you, or they looked at you in a certain funny way. And then what ends up happening, that's also where the problem solver exists. And that's also why there's a lack of contentment, because that is a thought chasing a thought, or a problem looking for a problem to solve. So it also leads to distractibility. So mind doesn't stay on intended objects of focus, and discontinuity of awareness and state. And there's also reactivity, which is really the cause of suffering. So reactivity meaning, because, you know, the Buddha said, Buddha was really the first neuroscientist, to be honest with you.
I like that. I like that visual image as well.
Yeah, because he was just exploring everything to the nth degree, you know, famine, joy, hedonism, everything to the nth degree. And then when he stopped and he sat down and he went, hold on a sec. If I don't push away suffering, and if I don't pull at, you know, happiness, joy, things that give me good experiences, what happens then? What if I'm not reactive? All of a sudden you transcend to a meta level, right? And then from an event perspective, the problem with the ordinary mind is that your disorganization of unfolding experience. You can't, because it's actually thoughts chasing thoughts, and you're scattered and elaborated and have elaborated mental content. So in other words, when something happens, so, you know, there's this whole conversation about form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Well, I've experienced that directly now. It's true. And well, the interesting thing about this is that if you actually touch thought, that's elaborating mental content. But in actual fact, you don't need to. because thought, if you experience thought in the first person, right, there's the difference between the objective science, which I sort of showed, but another thing about the subjective experience. The subjective experience has been downtrodden for hundreds of years. No, I'm sorry. Your first person experience, if there's one message I can leave you with today, empower yourself to trust your first person experience as equally as the objective experience, objective data.
Amen, brother. Preach it.
Yeah. So, so in your subjective experience, if you honestly slow down and allow thought to arise, you experience it as inner hearing, mainly. My question is, who's hearing it? To who does thought appear? I'm going to leave that with that because I'm just conscious of time.
That's like one of those Zen riddles. To whom does thought appear?
Well, it's actually the painting behind me is Ramana Maharshi, who's is just an amazing guide for me. And it's one of his pointings is just question yourself, question who am I, and when thoughts and sensations appear, ask to who does this appear, and then you'll find out you can't. If you get honest about it, beyond just your conceptual existence, you can't answer the question. It's a mystery. So the case for training the mind. So we're going to talk a little bit about the default mode network, which is where they've discovered only in the last 5 to 7 years where this false sense of self or the conceptual sense of self is created. It's part of certain parts of the brain and happens when you mind wander. And we actually spend 47% of our day, generally speaking, in mind wandering. So that's a big chunky amount of time to actually invest in certifying that this separate sense of self that has entitlement and rights and opinions and points of view, that it exists. So, I can have compassion for people who, get caught up in that, and as I do every day. So default mode of resting brain when resting with eyes closed or not engaged in goal-directed tasks or external orientation triggers the default mode network. There's a lack of deliberate intent here. Spontaneous self-referential thoughts and memories, anticipations and imaginings create the false self, mostly without metacognitive awareness. It just kind of happens, is ruminating. For me, for the longest of time, it always used to hit me that 3 a.m. wake up, right? And I get rushing of thought storms and monkey mind that used to just, tell me about the yesterday and worry about the future. And I'm happy to say I don't have that anymore. That's pretty amazing. And what also happens with the default mode network when it's fired is you get task intrusion and obviously unhappiness. So in other words, you're working on one thing, it pops in and says, "I'll check your calendar or check your inbox," or "What is that person doing?" And you actually jumping from thing to thing to thing. You try and mask that by calling it multitasking, but it's not true.
And in the multitasking research, they measure how much time it takes you to jump between the thing to the thing to the thing to the thing.
Yeah. But if you're in flow and you get distracted, it takes you 20 minutes to get back to the same level of flow that you started. So the default mode network is made up of about 3 or 4 or 5 different parts of the brain, but generally the PCC, which is in the frontal cortex, and the 2 parietal lobes on the rear left and right hand side. There's been a lot of study on this in the last few years, well, at least for the 20 years, and a lot more regarding the medial prefrontal cortex, but also the posterior cingulate, which is what creates self-referential thinking, self-judgment and evaluation, imagination, creativity, and switching from one thing to another. So, and then the medial temporal lobe, which is about prior experience, personal memory, and anticipations. All concepts. So what if we could actually quieten the default mode network through meditation? And there are things that there are certain practices that rapidly allow that to happen. Because many of us have sat on the cushion to do meditation, and before you know it, you're not meditating. you're actually chasing thought.
Or you're asleep.
Chasing thought. It's hilarious, but there are more than these practices available to us. And that's what I've discovered, and that's what rapidly changed my brain. Is this is what I'm offering here? Is that there are more advanced practices that can get you there really rapidly. I was thinking about doing a guided practice today, but we might run out of time. I haven't got too many slides left. So meditation is not relaxation therapy. It quietens the mind. Meditation is not designed to address psychopathology. So, you know, get the right necessary help. Meditation is about addressing the problem of everyday unhappiness. Meditation is about awakening, liberation from suffering, and discovering the real nature of mind's awareness. The real nature of mind, believe it or not, is the boundless ocean of awakened awareness. Everything is awareness, even thoughts, feelings, sensations. Happy to spend as much time with anyone who wants to challenge that. Clouded over by seeming substantial constructions of mind, emptiness removes clouds systematically. Let's practice. So I was going to do a practice. Let's see if we can get through these slides. So there's a certain Indo-Tibetan practice called emptiness, which was put together by Padmasambhava, who's the second Buddha, who has totally impacted my life. And you can actually use the emptiness practice to discover the emptiness of self, phenomena, and time. And then you can go all the way to extraordinary aspects of being, such as duality, limiting schemas or beliefs, and information processing bias. That's a little bit advanced, but you know, what's interesting is the research has also substantiated these things, and this is Daniel P. Brown, not the author, on the right, and on the left is Dr. Judd. Yeah, cool. Dr. Judd Brewer, who's just amazing, and they've done a 10-year outcome study on 30 long-term practitioners of these protocols that we're talking about, awakening protocol. They're about to start a enlightenment protocol. So awakening is where you have fleeting moments. You can get there consciously, but enlightenment is stabilized. And what they've shown through this study that I can share with people is the neurocircuitry of awakening. And what they've shown is that there are parts of the brain that have so much high gamma when they're in these non-dual oceans and waves, lines, gaze kind of view, because in Mahamudra they say that the view is the meditation. And Dan Brown reckons that if you can stay in these practices for 7 years consistently, you will experience full enlightenment, quantifiably, scientifically proven, that basically manifests as super high gamma across the brain, as well as, you know, your direct experience of reality being very different to the way we triggered ones typically experience it. So it's very exciting research, and they've proven it out. And this is with 30 long-term 10-year practitioners, and I'm currently studying with Dan Brown. So it's pretty amazing.
But I think it's also interesting, Constantine, because the personal experiment that you've undertaken would also lend itself to 50 or 100 people doing the identical experiment over a 2-month period, and then being able to do some comparative.
Well, that's what we're looking for. That's what I'll lead into that in a sec, because you know what's really important, especially around the current lay of the land, is that mental health is to knowledge workers as physical health is to laborers. But we don't pay it as much attention as now we are, I think, maybe, but we need to pay more attention to it. And leadership is suffering as well, right? There's a lot of interesting data. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but 93% of employees surveyed believe that their stressed leaders are ineffective in leading their teams.
Well, stress makes you dumb, so that would be accurate.
Yeah, right. And only 11% of employees with stressed leaders are highly engaged at work. More importantly, when leaders fail to manage their stress in a constructive way, more than 50% of their employees perceive the leader as harmful or ineffective.
Geez, that's a strong statement, isn't it?
It is, yeah. But you know, when they do take part in mindfulness, just mindfulness practices, not the stuff that I'm talking about, is the psychological capital of an organization rises: hope, optimism, self-efficacy, and resilience. And that's a 3-year-old study. So you might be asking, okay, what happened after the 10-week retreat? Well, it's continuing, as you can see. 4 months later, I still have this feeling of freedom. If I do get, look, I'm not saying that you don't get triggered. It just means that the trigger doesn't last as long, and you know what to do with it, and you know
And you
what
can
it's made of.
recognize it. Yeah, you can recognize it quickly and direct it in a certain way.
Well, actually, you don't touch it. All you do is you look at it and you say, it's information, it's vibration, it's an energy, and I understand. Maybe there's a lesson here, maybe.
Well, you unattach.
Sorry.
You unattach from it.
Yeah, yeah. Your relationship with it changes. So, final slide. I mean, we're starting our first cohort next year, and in January. But in the meantime, if people are interested, we're taking in cohort, our first cohort. It's all virtual at the moment. 90-minute weekly sessions, 10-week program, guided unique protocols, quantified progress, and building a community of seekers to finders, right? Because what we want to try and do is basically use a lot of the protocols. I've got different, I got the teachers on as faculty, and also more importantly, this is not just about practice on the cushion. This is in the midst of life, because that's the gap. The gap is, well, how do I live this, right? How do I take it into the board meeting when things are going poorly? How do I live this, in a relationship that is, not as cohesive as it could be? All those things is where we need to be living from. We need to be awakened in the midst of VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So thank you.
So can you, that's fantastic. Thank you. And there's so much interesting detail and concepts in there. But can you just tell us philosophically what liberation is for you?
Very good.
It's
Great
a beautiful
question.
word. Yeah, it's a beautiful word. So I'm interested in your connection with it.
My direct experience of liberation is not feeling, some of this might be a bit mystical for some people unless they've experienced it. Instead of feeling like you're somewhere in here, you feel spacious. Firstly, you can't locate where you're located from. So there's this field of awareness. There's no time tyranny. That sort of, lack of contentment leads you to fill the hole in typically bad ways. So then you're liberated from those things because there's no hole to fill because you're fully content right here, right present, spacious. And I took out the slide on heart mind, but you access heart mind. So there's a certain practice that allows you to get into what's called awake awareness, that provides all of those things that are reported on there. So spacious, non-local, intimately connected with everything here, including humans, and having this innate level of compassion for no reason and love for no reason, that whenever something arises and comes into your sphere of awareness, you can't help but have compassion for it. So this really lands the point that Einstein made some time ago, where he said, we can't solve problems from the same level of consciousness that created it. I really understand that now. So one of the things that we've been asked to do is to put together what we call a wisdom bank, and actually go into organizations and help them access, do certain practices and access the same problem through a different level of consciousness, to see if we can actually see new solutions that we never considered before. So stuff like that. And it is difficult to explain as well. So when I was talking about the liberation piece, the actual experience is ineffable. It's ineffable.
I think
everyone says the same thing.
Comparable to quantum physics, because if you think about being in the quantum, the way that that's described, which is, non-linear, non-time, very spacious, it's all of those words that you were just using to describe liberation, is the way that I would language is, it's just saying you're existing in the quantum, and you're recognizing that that's the case, and you're able to play with those dynamics.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, language doesn't do it any justice, and adding, yeah, we sometimes refer to it as the quantum field, sure. But I'm just a little bit careful about being too committed to certain language. It feels like liberation, and it feels like you've achieved something. You know, when I don't know if you've ever experienced something like you're climbing a mountain or whatever it is, and you get to the top and you look at the view and you go, ah, nothing else left to do, right? And that's very fleeting though, right? Well, this is happening for no good reason. There's no reason. There's no,
There's lots of good reasons why it's happening.
sorry, there's no event. It's actually the ground of everyone's being, and we don't, no
Well,
one has
it's
a
a normal
monopoly.
state. It is truly our normal state. It's just that most of us are living in such an abnormal state that we get confused with what normality and abnormality actually is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a question from 2 hours dedicated to reading. What would you recommend as reading material aligned to such a pursuit? Oh, what a great question. I would definitely recommend the book from Daniel P. Brown. It's a hard read, but it's definitely worth it, called Pointing Out the Great Way. Why I like this lineage and this approach is that it's all about pointing out, not about theory. Like, for example, because I did promise on the bio that I was going to provide some guidance. So I'll start with a really easy one. Just check into your belly right now, Michelle.
Yep.
And just take a breath and listen to this question. What's here now when there's no problem to solve?
Nothing. That's my answer. And everything. It's nothing and everything.
Yeah. And so that little kind of inquiry question helps your brain just stop for a microsecond, looking for what's coming up next. Am I on schedule? What's for dinner? Blah, blah, blah. And just check and give you a little bit of respite, right? And I think it's really important because we can easily fill our days with so much. And there's obviously an attention warfare going on at the moment. And if there's one conspiracy I would suggest is that A, we're limited, and neuroplasticity proves that wrong. And B, that we can't, we're locked down and that's it. You can't do anything but watch Netflix and blah, blah. I've just proven that is bullshit, and that we can take control of our destiny and our happiness and our ability to be more focused, more effective, and have a bigger impact for our families and for the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that is such an empowering place to start wrapping up our conversation, is the idea that we can take control of ourselves and our hearts and our minds,
Yeah.
to not just improve our life, but have that ripple effect out for other people's lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you have this direct experience of who you truly are, all of a sudden you start to apply it to, well, I'm not unique and special. Everyone else is the same. Oh, wow. And, hence why I've gone from doing venture capital work to building something in this space, because I think it's really amazing. And when you combine that with, more conscious teams that are more successful in the long run, then let's have the data to support and allow people to kind of go, look, we want to back people who have gone through a process and can prove that they are mature in the level of consciousness.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for such a practical session and sharing, you know, the details of your experiment, because I think that's very empowering for people to be able to hear that. Where can people find you, Constantine, if they want to get in touch or need more information from you? What's the
Yeah,
best?
yeah. Just like I said, there's we got an entry form for the first cohort on theconsciousaccelerator.com, or on LinkedIn. It's Constantine Georgiou. That's easy as well. Or con at theconsciousaccelerator.com. That's a little bit of a mouthful. But I also noticed, just the last question, is the liberated state an end in itself, or is it the setup to do more and more effectively?
Oh, what a great question.
It's the end itself. It's the end.
And I would say it's end. Both.
Yeah, yeah. But here's the thing. There's some interesting research done by Jeffrey Martin, called, there's a book on it called The Finders. He's actually done 15-year study on people who, you got seekers. These are people who've found it and have stabilized in it for quite some time via different means, some spontaneously, some not. And what he's quantified is that there's 4 different locations that are the bulk of people are in. And these are the locations that I shared with everyone today, those experiences of being. And then there's more as well. But what's really important is that one of the locations, you can feel quite dissociative and quite dysfunctional. And I get that, what that feels like. It's very yummy, but it's a little bit difficult to operate from there. Hence why, we're not saying like liberation is going all the way from ordinary mind down to Rigpa or Turiya or awakened awareness, but actually operating somewhere in between in here, which is
And we're also not saying that the idea of evolving ever stops either.
no, 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 no. Experiencing doesn't stop, but feeling liberated from ordinary mind can stop.
Yeah. And that's really the whole point to it, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, we might wrap up there. Thank you so much for your time and your energy and your interesting insights and being willing to experiment on yourself for everyone else's benefit as well. Like Constantine already mentioned, you can find him on LinkedIn. For those of you who have just jumped on, there'll be a post in the feed about our online immersion program that we have coming up on December 12th. And there's a lot of stuff we're doing with sound healing and sound therapy in the start of that online immersion program. So just for the time period of the summit only, it's $67 and it goes up to $111 after that. So we'd love it if you could take another step down the road toward your own liberation by joining us on that. And thanks again, Constantine. Appreciate it and lovely to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. And wonderful, and a privilege to be here, and a wonderful mission as well that you both have got going here. I think bringing people together during these times is very important. And if there's anything that I've learned this year is that there's no such thing as lockdown.
Yeah, amen. All right, thank
All
you.
right, take care.
Bye.
Thank you.